The definition of evil is profound immorality and wickedness. On the spectrum of evil, the Black Demesne falls on the extreme end of immorality, on the path to achieve absolute power. Absolute magical power. To quote the Anbennar Encyclopedia, the Black Demesne is a radical ideology espousing magical supremacy and the unification of Halan under a single magocratic state. It began as a thought experiment in the Order of the Iron Scepter, and it greatly admires Nichmer, the sorcerer king of the 11th century. He was the closest a necromancer has ever been to conquering Kannor, using the vast resources of the Empire of Castanor and his own magical power. He failed, but his echo still rings in the ears of hidden practitioners of the dark arts. Anyone can follow this dark path and form the Black Demesne, but in this story we will focus on the Order of the Iron Scepter, which is the nation specifically tailored for it. The Order of the Iron Scepter is an Aldresian adventurer band found in the middle of Escan, facing the bloodthirsty Green Tide tribes, where many adventurers came to fight for vengeance, justice, glory, or riches. The Order has come to take advantage of the chaos and hide from the watchful eye of the Magisterium. They have come to practice and experiment with magic, unrestrained by the tired dogma of magical authorities. In 1444, they are ruled by Magister Aldred Silchaveren, a powerful mage. On the field of battle, powerful mage generals or war wizards crush any opposition, so it is not at all difficult for them to overpower the neighboring orcs and other adventure bands on their warpath to Castonath. At administrative technology level 7, the Order may choose to form their own country. This new country is Esthil. Magical power rules here over blood and tradition. There are no notable changes at first, aside from a new set of ideas. A little patience will reveal in only a few months an argument in the leadership council of Esthil between a conservative former professor, Ardor, and an up-and-coming necromancer, Varina. At the time of this recording, only Varina's path is developed with any sort of content, so we have to choose Varina in the deadlock event. Doing so will unlock the real mission tree and our quest for power can truly begin. If one finds themselves too timid to use necromancy, and by the use of such dark magics become shunned by the rest of the world, Esthil will be their gateway into this dark path of forbidden magics. Not only is necromancy encouraged, it is mandatory. The necromancy school has 3 major spells. The first and simplest is Absorb Life Energy, which generates a meager amount of mana in exchange for either the life of an advisor or the development of a random province. The second one is Raise Undead Army. This spell is used to primarily change the unit composition and the military modifier. Whatever racial military a nation has, upon casting this spell, will change to Army of the Dead. Any flesh and blood troops will be replaced by a terrifying skeleton and zombie undead horde. There are many modifiers, but in principle the Undead Army has a 2.5 larger force limit with unlimited manpower and an exceptionally high morale. Infantry costs half price and its recovery cost is also halved. Morale and reinforcement speed is greatly increased and will raise enemy soldiers from the dead after battles to be added to the manpower pool. Unit pips are very low and they take increased damage from all sources, but their sheer numbers and unholy morale are the tools that win battles, especially because reserve morale is not affected by troops being killed on the front lines. They don't care, they're already dead. The major disadvantage of an army of the dead is their extremely slow movement speed. Their 50% slower movement is noticeable and any regular army can easily outmaneuver them. The solution is to create a wall of undead armies and conquer the lands in such a way in which there are little to no gaps in the front line. Another problem is increased national unrest, which creates the need for local garrison units that must be tasked with fighting rebels after conquests. As a small parting gift, the spell will also generate a few infantry units anytime it is used. An important note is that the undead hordes are bound to the necromancer that summons them. If the necromancer meets their own untimely demise, then the army will rebel and turn against its own nation. This is extremely dangerous. A subsequent necromancer may pay a small price to bind the army yet again, but if the heir is not a practitioner of the dark arts, then the nation will be ruined. This is not a problem if the summoner is immortal, which leads us to the third necromantic spell. Pursue Lichdom. requires legendary proficiency in the Necromancy school. This spell allows the caster to attempt to pursue immortality through undeath. It is a lengthy ritual, which will require a substantial amount of mana and coin to succeed. Once the ritual begins, there are a number of steps which need to be undertaken. Each step is represented by its own event, which demands its respective cost, and the higher the price paid, the higher the chance to win. By winning, I mean the sorcerer will not simply die in the final step of the ritual. The final chance to die in the ritual is actually calculated somewhere close to the end of it, around 3 steps before the final one, so it is prudent to save the game before you cast a spell in case anything goes wrong. If all goes well, the ruler will no longer die in the traditional sense. If the leader is made into a general, then the chance to be destroyed is real. If they are destroyed in battle or for any other reasons though, they will return back to the throne with slightly worse stats than before, but will return nonetheless. The only way to permanently destroy a lich is to have an enemy army hold their capital for enough time until they discover and destroy the lich's phylactery, which holds their life essence. This should never be allowed to happen, obviously. Being a lich or raising an undead army will also cause the world to deem the ruler a witch king, regardless of their gender. Being declared a witch king applies a permanent modifier for as long as the ruler stays in power. This will enable the war against evil casus belli for every other nation, but bestows further military bonuses. More morale, more manpower, more land force limit, and more troop discounts as well as discipline. It also grants administrative benefits in the form of 50% stability cost, more absolutism, less unjustified demands, and some yearly Coronite Paragon points. The downsides are an additional 2 points of unrest and a massive -6 diplomatic reputation, along with slower, improved relations and 10% more aggressive expansion impact. The diplomatic reputation makes annexing vassals almost impossible, while the aggressive expansion can be counteracted by the unnaturally high force limit. Nations will be too afraid to declare a coalition if your armies are overwhelmingly strong, but you will stand alone. Varina's first focuses are her magical studies and the removal of the orcish blight from the face of Escan. So focused she is that she does not even notice or care that her nation's ideas are useless. Esthil's ideas are so bad, they may be worse than the generic ones. That's not a problem, it just frees her attention from an aspect of life that is not that urgent. Some ideas are simply useless, like the second or third one. The rest are just unremarkable, so let's move on. The first order of business is to grant the mage estate the privilege to reduce research regulations, which transforms it immediately into the necromancer estate. The school of magic banned by the magisterium will take first stage in these free lands. The necromancers are largely identical to the estate they replace in mechanical terms. From a conquest and expansion perspective, Varina's eyes are set firmly on the whole inner Castanor, from the farmlands of Northmere to the mines of Steel Hill. A marvelous mage tower is built in the capital of South Castonath, which makes advisors cheaper as hungry scholars come to enjoy the intellectual freedom that the magical tower promises. The magnificent white walls of Castanor are to be reclaimed and reinforced, with black keeps constructed to watch over Esthil's growing prosperity. Orcs are being massacred without mercy. They are cleaned out of the capital through the City of the Dead mission. No city has ever been as clean as Castonath after the Esthili purges. They are also hunted and removed from the countryside through the Resistance's futile mission. In her relentless pursuit for eternal life and necromantic power, Varina encourages her necromancers to learn and experiment with the raising of the dead from the battlefields where the Green Tide fought the kingdoms of Castanor. Not only did they raise the dead to replace the unreliable army of the living, but also began experimenting with using undead labor in the fields around Lake Silvermere. The success allowed the living to instead live their lives in cities and pursue other crafts, and every sheaf of grain would go to the living instead of having to feed the workforce it came from. Below the Serpent Spine, slaughtered orc zombie miners are used to unearth rich mineral deposits, and the Steel Hills are renamed colloquially as the Dead Mines. The mindless dead are able to dig deeper for resources, and the necromancers set up a control point in Shatterwood behind the eastern white walls to keep the undead workers subservient and functioning at peak efficiency in the ever-growing labyrinth of tunnels. Some would call this new order a nightmare, but some would argue that the current situation makes life easier for everyone alive, not having to worry about suffering the hardships of dangerous manual labor. In the province of Ar-Urion, a new institution is built to reshape flesh in a more useful form before being animated. The Stitchworks is constructed with the blessing of the state, with the purpose of improving the shambling armies. It succeeded at mitigating the speed penalty of the dead, as well as making the infantry cheaper to maintain. In the east, Ardent Keep was renamed to Skull Keep, and it began acting as a bastion of regional power, as well as a prison for the enemies of the state, orc apologists, anti-imperialists, and anti-undead activists. The horrors inflicted to these insurgents are not to be spoken of, but the result was clear in lowering unrest around the rest of the nation. Out of Skull Keep, the Dread Legion, together with the Knights of the Black Eye, emerge. Elite warriors of the Green Tide who now serve quietly for a chance to redeem their past failures in their war against the invading orcs. Experiments also weaponized spectral ghosts in the form of the Pale Host, a small but invulnerable division of ghosts used for the most dangerous tactical missions of the Esthil army. In the meantime, Varina's studies allowed her to achieve legendary necromantic abilities, and she set off on the quest to obtaining immortality using her own experience and the lessons of Kanarek the Defiler. She drank the transformation potion and achieved lichdom in the historical year of 1506. To further her plans, she would require 2 sources of Damesteer. There are only a few known permanent sources of Damesteer in Kannor. Moon Isle, controlled by the Damage Temple in the Dameshead Sea, is one of them. The Isle of Adrail, in the same body of water, controlled by the Magisterium, is a massive source of Damesteer once the Mage Council learns how to harness mineral-rich meteors. A more attainable permanent source is the gnomish island of Baykods in the Shattered Bay, south of the Dragon Coast. Varina's armies would have to conquer their way to the coast and then fight the mighty kingdom of Gaved for control over Baykods. The second source of Damesteer are the occasional random meteor hits that would bring a temporary source of the mineral in various random provinces across Hallan. Unreliable and temporary, these sources are just as useful. The Tower of Esthil is an imposing structure, but it pales in comparison to the Black Tower of Vertesk. Using the Damesteer, Varina's necromancers and mages built a magical foundation for the tower, and as the populace watched, it took to the skies to serve as a mobile palace in a show of power unmatched in history. This flying necropolis is renamed after the first lich, Morgurax. The Morgurax would hover above Esthil and bring prosperity through order in the provinces it would hover over. Newly conquered provinces would be more swiftly absorbed and made into core provinces, while production and construction efficiency would be greatly increased. Some provinces would rejoice when the necropolis would arrive, and as a consequence, the nation would witness incredible boosts of financial prosperity, for example when Morgurax would hover over places like Silverford on the shores of Lake Silvermere. A religious knightly zeal is stirred when it hovers over Taranton, and the examples continue. History would unravel still, and Corinne's fervor was embraced by the citizens of Esthil. The undead conquered slowly but surely the lands in and around the former empire of Castanor. The holy wars within Anbennar raged, and Varina's undead tipped the scales in the favor of the Corinites, which allowed them to declare a Corinite empire. With Morgurax hovering over the skeleton farmers and laborers, Esthili scholars have compiled their learnings and coded the Book of Necronomics, lowering the unrest caused by the seemingly immoral leadership by presenting the hard facts of the betterment of life for the living caused by the use of necromancy. This paved the way for a future where development and prosperity is guaranteed by the tireless work of the dead. After 100 years in power, Varina the Lich crafted a potent magical artifact of white gold fitted with gems of Damesteer to ensure that the ruler of the country shall never suffer rebellion from the undead. And thus she placed the crown of the damned over her shriveled scalp. The crown of the dead brought further order with even more unrest reduction and the unwavering loyalty of the necromancer's estate. Between the crown, the necronomics, and the stitchworks, many of the more traditional drawbacks of necromancy have been mitigated. When the wars of Eskani consolidation were declared, no trumpets were sounded in Eskan. The shambling legions marched through eastern Kannor in dead silence and without contest. In 1638, Esthil was declared the sole dominant power, and the next step in Varina's eternal journey has begun, with the proclamation of the Order of the Iron Scepter's dream, the Black Demesne. The ascending dragon is crowned on the skull throne. A long road of cultivation awaits. All that came before was a beautiful prologue. The Day of Ashen Skies, the Green Tide, the Wars of Consolidation. It all set the stage for this moment, the dawning of the true history of the mortal races. A story of triumph, evolution, perfection. A story of destruction, of a tearing down of all things. A story of creation, of the building of a new order. A story of intuition, sharpened and formed through great practice. The story begins with the ascension of Varina, who has conceived of a grand century-spanning project to shatter the chains of illusion, superstition, and ignorance. Those of magical potential will be liberated from their mundane oppressors, and the irrational patchwork of laws, nations, politics, societies, religions, and cultures will be swept away to be replaced with new forms based on reason and mystic understanding. The ascension took place in a grand meeting hall in the city of Castonath, the stage on which human history has always been meant to play out. A dozen representatives of all the old order, religious leaders, political leaders, merchants, each came to one by one kiss the hand of the ascending dragon, the one who would be the one. Each took their place as directed, standing in a line behind her. They trembled as they touched the crown, slowly lifting it and placing it on her head as one. And then everything changed, immensely and irrevocably. The Esthili ideas, timid as they were, reach a dizzying apex under the Black Demesne doctrine. Black Demesne ideas are supreme. 20% siege ability, 20% shock damage mitigation are only the beginning. The undisputed power of the mage class allows a form of social mobility based on meritocracy for the ungifted that is rarely seen in other lands. Plus 20 maximum absolutism, 5% discounted mana costs, minus 5 years of separatism, triple manpower in wars against the foes of the doctrine, discipline and morale, as well as lower liberty desire in subjects and a slightly higher government capacity make the Demesne ideas amazing. With a snap of the fingers, the Sorcerer Queen tore apart the throats of each of those dignitaries, opening up torrential fountains of blood to flood the steps and seep down into the crowd below. Those who had assembled to watch cried out in horror and rushed for the door, but found it barred and immovable. "Fear not, subjects mine. I have come to end those things which have been and replace them with those which will be. You too must forget what you have been and become something more. You must become something greater than that which was, for that which was leads always to the end that those before you have met. There is nothing to be found but death, dust, and ash. But immortality can be yours, my precious creatures, as this is my promise to you. Each and every one of you will have a sacred purpose, a part to play in this grand project of ours. Each and every one of you, no matter how pathetic or how weak, no matter how poor or how wretched, can contribute and imprint yourself on the eternal order I shall build. I offer you a chance to join me to break apart those things which have kept you alone and confused." The crowd has calmed, and through some combination of fear and genuine persuasion, they begin to shout acclamations to the Sorcerer Queen. She departs, followed by a long line of magical initiates. The doors open, revealing that there was seemingly nothing barring them at all. An illusory set of decrees has been projected on the walls of the building outside, the first laws creating the new Black Demesne. All old classes and privileges have been abolished. There are now only two groups: people of intuition, which is to say the mage class, and the other mundane creatures, which is to say everyone else. Spelled out in clear detail are the attendant rights of each. There is much weeping then, but in time, an acceptance of affairs will set in. The people of Castonath will come around, and they will see the path that the ascending dragon has traveled to forge this out of the chaos. And in that acceptance, they will touch the barest pieces of the prime discordance, those little shards of chaos they can handle without shattering their little minds. And it will be the most glorious ecstasy one can be given. True purpose, true service, true victory. It is these things that are now emblazoned in arcane illumination upon the city gates, telling all who enter here what the City of Cities now stands for, that which it should always have stood for. Purpose, service, victory. The Black Demesne government is the embodiment of magical absolutism. It reduces mana costs with the usual magical drawback of making technological advances more expensive, and increases maximum absolutism by further 15 points. Rulers are always powerful mage, witch kings, but Varina will not step down from the Skull Throne for the rest of eternity. With the abolishment of classes, rule is delegated to a new special type of subject, the Acolytes. They are organized through a set of laws and replace the Necromancer estate, as dealing with lesser beings will henceforth be delegated to this black host. The Acolytes are ambitious and cruel mages of great power that are granted dominions of their own to rule over. They all aspire to ascend to the title of Sorcerer Kings or Queens and are very difficult to please. In order to pacify them, they need to hold at least 20% of the development belonging to the Sorcerer Queen. So, if the total development is 140, for example, the Black Demesne may hold 100 development, with the rest of the 40 development split equally between two Acolytes. If the Acolytes hold too little land, then they will gain 150 Liberty Desire. For each unsatisfied one, the Sorcerer Queen's administrative efficiency is decreased by 10%, so keeping them in line is a high priority. This can be done via force, diplomacy, or various estate laws. The first two Acolyte dominions are created through missions, and the rest, up to a total of 7, can further be created in newly conquered lands or via the Acolyte menu decision paired with a special state edict. All this circus comes with a great advantage, the Black Invasion Casus Belli. This allows the Black Demesne to attack a country and fully annex it in a single war. The size of the country that can be targeted with the special CB will vary depending on the number of existing Acolytes. Each Acolyte will allow Black invasions to be declared on larger and larger nations, but having a full roster of 7 subjects will permit the Demesne to declare such a war on any country regardless of size. Either way, the Black Invasion Peace Treaty at the end of a war will allow 3 options: to randomly split the lands of the invaded country between the Demesne and its mage subjects according to the land distribution law estate privilege, to release and grant the lands to a new Acolyte dominion if they are less than 7, or to annex all the lands directly, which will greatly upset the Acolytes. Invasions are a great way to set up new subjects without sacrificing more of your core lands. Another note is that when a mortal Acolyte finally dies, the same 3 options will present themselves. Their lands may be simply assigned to a new Acolyte, or they may be split according to the landshare law, or fully annexed by the Sorcerer Queen. This will be a constant tug of war to keep everyone happy, yet weak enough to be easily pacified and controlled. This is the nature of the primordial discordance, and it must be so. The declaration of the new order was seen as dramatic and impressive within Castonath and nearby regions, but it cannot be denied that the Demesne does not yet possess the influence to impose its vision, tearing down the old order and imposing a new, more enlightened magical regime on the rest of Kannur. In order to gain that influence and power, Varina and her advisors have developed the so-called Black Blueprint. The blueprint lays out a long-term, century-spanning plan to expand the Demesne's borders both internally and externally. Externally, the Demesne will continue marching on its conquest of the surrounding regions, burning down the vestiges of what once was and building what will be. This is the part of the blueprint that will be public knowledge. The internal blueprint, however, remains a secret of the mage class. They have developed plans to probe at the boundaries of magic, to develop a scientific and rational understanding of mystical forces, and to touch those things once called dangerous and forbidden. By pursuing both objectives, the Mystic Revolution will tear down the world asunder and build it anew in the vision of the Sorcerer Queen. A great plan, one must assume. A level below the Acolytes are the Apostles. These creatures live to serve the administrative needs of coring random provinces in the chaotic border war created by Black Invasion annexations. Apostles will save administrative power, requiring only gold to begin coring provinces, but the process is slower than usual. Both the Demesne and its subjects have access to Apostles, while the Black Blueprint Tier 2 government reform reduces coring and advisor costs. The beliefs of the Old Order are not merely harmless superstition or confused delusion. They are an active set of lies designed to shackle the natural intuition of the mortal races. To combat this, the Skull Throne has taken the diffuse and frequently contradictory spiritualism of the esoteric texts, as well as the practical political objectives of the state, and formulated a new faith to be known as the Black Doctrine. This faith is directly controlled from Castonath's charred tower, but it is based on a real and genuine undercurrent of true religious feeling. The doctrine does not reject the existence of deities. In fact, it is a point of doctrine that extremely powerful beings have emerged from primal forces. However, these beings are not worthy of being worshipped. Instead, they are derisively known as the Demiurges, who have crafted the Old Order and all its religions as they currently stand to keep mortals in obscured ignorance. The Sorcerer Queen and the Acolytes are set out as models of perfected mortals who have sharpened their gift of intuition and pierced the veil of illusion that keeps the soul in chains. In an inversion of the Demiurges, they are not naturally born as deities or magically powerful individuals, but through their works have made themselves worthy of being worshipped as gods. While the old beliefs are not yet officially outlawed, generous advantages are granted to organizations that preach the Black Doctrine, as well as the individuals who teach it. As a result, it has begun to spread like wildfire in the core territories of the Demesne, not least because those who are true believers are far less likely to end up on the wrong side of a magical initiate. New truths break ancient chains. The religious creed of the Black Demesne was termed the Black Doctrine and rejected any and all gods, taking the position that the world was fundamentally chaotic and that only magic could tame said chaos. It also espouses total equality, with all beings equal under magical law. Most controversially, it took the position that sufficiently powerful mages could become as gods themselves. The religion itself is part of the atheistic group and grants tax and maximum absolutism bonuses as a baseline. In addition to that, religious power is gained and used like in the vanilla Protestantism denomination for different useful bonuses that can be mixed and matched in groups of 3. The fundamental restructuring of the nation is rounded up with the reorganization of the army and of the adventurer estate. The undead army is put under control of mage generals, who are incentivized to take a more personal approach to warfare. Non-magical recruits are being promoted based on merit in the various special functions of the army, from skirmishers, engineers, elite troops, and so on. The ones who cannot perform in these capacities simply join the dead on the front lines. The Adventurer Institution is also reformed and made to serve the state apparatus in doing good on the behalf of the Demesne, within the state and beyond. Creatures with magical potential are being identified by the powerful mages and brought to one of the many Academy of Shadows secret locations to be raised as fully fledged wielders of the mystic intuition. Those who die fail. Those who live graduate. Everything comes together to bring order through chaos. Life outside the Demesne is nasty, poor, brutish, and short. Through the cultivation of intuition, we have brought into being the purest harmonies of all history. When we impose our will on others, it is not out of a desire for violence, but a thirst for everlasting order and peace. All this was just the beginning. The century-spanning plan unravels as a massive mission tree that will see Varina instate the Black Purges, magical duels between the acolytes and herself, as a constant show of magical domination over them, and as a way to weed out the weaker acolytes and pave the way for stronger mages to emerge and assume power. Anbennar will tremble and form a final coalition mirroring the one that toppled the ancient Nichmer, only to be proven impotent against the undead hordes and its mage generals. She will explore and learn the secrets of the Fey Vale in the deep woods. She will harvest the power of the Fey realm and map the roots of the ancient world tree, unshackling herself from her phylactery and achieving true immortality. In the process, the army of the dead is made ever swifter on the battlefield. She will discover a sleeping dragon in the north, craft a majestic scepter, and fight the dragon in a magical duel. Yorgurem, the frozen dragon, will be struck down and resurrected to serve the sorcerer queen like all creatures of Halan. She will blot out the sun over Bulvar, graft gnomish brains into the risen bodies of her subjects, and end the pestilence that is the halfling kind in the most gruesome, terrifying, and final manner. Purpose, service, victory. And ye shall break the mundane over your knee, and from it ye shall free the world, and in it ye shall be freed from the world. I think it is unnecessary to reiterate how amazing the Black Demesne experience is. The simple fact that the event images and mission icons are animated are a sign that you are witnessing something extremely special. I have never seen this before, and it was very surprising and exciting for me. Its defining theme is absolute power. You will sum up so much maximum absolutism that you will be able to run a full roster of estate privileges and still have absolutism to spare beyond the 100 cap. Through natural gameplay, I managed to reach more than 60% all power cost reduction due to the heavy magical focus of the Demesne through different permanent modifiers gained in the campaign. It is the first time in Anbennar where I wanted to achieve and actually did achieve a complete world conquest. The only thing is that you may never have less than one acolyte, so a one-tag victory is not possible as far as I know. Of course, Esthil is the nation destined to form the Black Demesne, but any witch king that wins the wars of Escani consolidation may also raise the Black Mantle. Handling the acolytes can be quite a chore, but it's not that bad really. It's a bit annoying to try and figure out who's who in the ocean of slightly different shades of black, and you will have to police their lands constantly, which was my personal nemesis. The Demesne itself will have no unrest problems due to enormous unrest reduction bonuses, but the acolytes are terrible in that aspect and will have rebels pop up constantly everywhere. Thankfully, your force limit will be so high that having rebels suppressing garrisons everywhere will not be a problem. My own final force limit rose to somewhere around 20,000 regiments. On the military side of things, the acolytes also field their own armies of the dead, and it's not like playing a vassal swarm, but more like playing a swarm of vassal swarms of Zerg hives. It's truly legendary. There are large numbers of Black Mark province modifiers in some specific provinces that will not do anything when under your control, but will grant a lot of power to the acolytes that hold the respective provinces, which adds another layer to the chaotic province management. The Black Purge duels are not at all difficult. They offer many offensive and defensive options, but simply spamming the legendary Necromancy spell in the duels while occasionally casting a protective shield will win any encounters with ease. This campaign and its story made me genuinely laugh with a malicious glee in some cases and awed me in others. Parts of the mission tree are hidden to amplify these effects, and they did work perfectly on me. I can say hands down that this is the best thing to come out of the Light and Dark expansion. Special thanks again to my Patreon, Baconomics, for sponsoring this channel. That's it for today, and if it hits Steam, I really hope to see you all in Hales for the next one, but we'll see. Bye bye everyone.